Cool. So, hello everybody. Welcome to the launch of the 11th Tech4Good Awards, which is a very exciting thing to be able to say in its own right. You won't be surprised to learn that I actually just went through the slides, Catherine, and took out the word virtual because I think it's fairly obvious that we're not going to be doing any face-to-face events, sadly. But just for anybody who's been involved for a number of years, of course, normally we're at the top of BT Tower right now, eating our sandwiches and pointing out the places that we know someone used to live. What we're going to do today, because we've gone online, what we're going to do is make a virtue of the networking that we can do. That's obviously a feature of a lot of the stuff we do with Tech4Good Awards. So I do want to spend as much time with you guys talking to each other as possible. We're also going to hear from 3 of last year's winners, because what we also like to do is really celebrate and connect up with the people who are doing Tech4Good and engage with them and find out more about what they're doing. So those are the 2 main things: a bit of networking and finding out more about the 3 of last year's winners. There's a little bit of updates for you about what's happening in the awards this year, you know, what the categories are, for example, and what the timeline is. But they're, in a sense, they're admin, just so that you can take that away and have a look later. As the longer we spend talking to each other and hearing from the winners, the better for me. Live captions are available. In Zoom, you have to turn them on in closed captions. If you need them, then hopefully you know how to do that. If you are stuck, then please shout. Use the Q&A box for questions. Chat is not particularly friendly for people using screen readers. It tends to read out everything that comes into it. So if you can use the Q&A rather than the chat, that would be great. Catherine and Sarah are monitoring that, and can either help you directly, feedback directly, or they can announce anything that needs to be announced. Please be respectful of our speakers and keep your microphones muted. The microphones muted thing obviously doesn't apply when you're doing the networking. Right, so we're going to hear, I'm just going to very briefly tell you about this year's awards, a couple of slides just to run through the details of what will look the same and what will look different this year. Then we're going to hear from Jac from Hug. We're going to do some networking, and then we're going to hear from Esther from Children on the Edge. We're going to do some networking, and then Matthew's going to tell us about the Artist Support Pledge. And so, as you can see, the networking is, we're hoping for about 10 minutes. Each time, 10 minutes from the winners, just to talk through where they're at and what they're doing. And at that point, obviously, Q&A will also engage you and have you chatting with the winners as well, hopefully, drawing you into the process. So as we go along, if you have questions about the process, then ask them anytime. And at the end, we'll then just round up and make sure everybody knows what's happening next and where we're going with it all. Firstly, a huge thank you. So far, there are a couple of other names lurking around that we're just trying to pull in, which is quite typical when we launch, is that there may be others who join us. We've got these organizations making this possible. So BT, once again, we've worked with BT all the way through the history of the Tech4Good Awards. So it's fantastic to continue that relationship. Charity Digital, Comic Relief, Crowdfunder, Do It, Good Things Foundation, Google, iDiversity, Lenovo, Microsoft, Semble, and the Worshipful Company of Information Technologists. Those are all names that we've worked with before, other than Semble, which is a new organization joining the family. And I think it's worth mentioning that the reason we're still doing what we're doing is because we've got that ongoing support from all of those people. There are lots of other organizations and individuals involved in the judging process and other support that we get elsewhere. So we say that the point of building this network is really to have the broadest reach. Of course, there's some finances in there that make the project work, but the partnership and the development of that network is really important for us, about reaching into communities where people are doing Tech4Good, and we want to sort of reach them and get them into the family. So that you can see that incredible spread there of different types of sizes of organization is exactly what we're aiming for in terms of diversity and reach, and including as many people as possible in the Tech4Good Awards. We have 10 awards this year. you'll recognize most of them as something that we've done before. One brand new, two brand new, and sort of a step into something slightly different. We've had an accessibility award every year. We've had a digital volunteer in some form every year. Tech4Good for Africa has been around. I think this is the 6th year that we've done that with Comic Relief. Education is a new description for something we've done in different ways before. We know that's an important one, and we did it last year. AI for Good is new. That is one that we think is interesting. It's sort of just, it's broken our golden rule of doing a Tech4Good award around a particular piece of technology. But I think the way that AI is being used is really interesting, and then sort of step beyond having the best app, for example. There's lots of really interesting stuff in the AI for Good sort of movement. Arts and culture we did last year. Community impact we've done since the start, working with particularly with the Good Things Foundation and their network of community-based centres and community development work. Workplace inclusion is new, but has been included in other sort of formats before. Sustainability, looking at the impact of that tech can have on developing sustainable solutions in all sorts of ways, in particular around climate change, but not just that. And then the BT Young Pioneer. We all know that we've been blown away by all those young people who get involved every year doing it once again, and BT once again sort of leading that work. And last year we had hundreds of entries. It was fantastic, and some amazing stories emerged from that. So I won't dwell on that just now, because we can share this news with you afterwards. Obviously, in terms of a launch event, what we want to do today is make sure that we're getting your support as much as possible to reach people who may be contenders and entrants in those categories. So there may be something that you want to check in about, eligibility and so on. But in terms of having 10 categories, that gives us the sort of starting point. Let's see what we can find out about what's going on out there in the world. Very briefly, in terms of who's eligible, that hasn't changed. Any organization, any shape or size or type, anywhere in the world. It is a lot easier if they have some connection into the UK because of the practicalities of that, but that's not a requirement. All the entries are handled in English is something that we've decided. Even allowing for translation, we are asking people to submit their work in English, but apart from that, the entry could be anywhere in the world. And there's no fee for entry is the other thing to say. I sort of forget that lots of competitions and awards categories do have a fee for entry. We don't. So we want as many entries as we possibly can. We'd like to see a real spread of different technologies being used. I guess in that sense, it's a digital technology that we're principally interested in here, but there are other areas we've seen as well. And we want to get as many entries as we can from across a spread of different community organizations, charities, social enterprises, businesses large and small, government. We've had NHS winners in the past. So, really, we want to make the diversity of our winners, is a huge plus for us that we're very proud of, and want to make that point continuously. There isn't really a boundary on who can enter this, and therefore we get a huge spread of entries. The only people who are likely to complain about that are the judges, because it makes it incredibly difficult to decide. But we want to get a real diversity and variety in our entries once again. So this brings in you here and our sort of broader community. We want you to help spread the word. The point in having a launch event is to make sure that everybody knows that entries are now open. You basically just send people to tech4goodawards.com and all the details will be in there about how to enter. So what we're asking you to do today is think about how you're going to generate entries. Where can we dip into networks that you're part of to engage and connect with people who are potential winners. And we're using Twitter principally. We want to grow the presence on LinkedIn, so anything you can do on LinkedIn would be great. We know there's lots of interesting stuff out there. There's lots of groups that you may be part of, or simply by posting something on your LinkedIn profile will obviously spread the word in a different way to Twitter. And the Tech4Good Awards hashtag glues it all together in some way. A very brief note, you are going to be asked at some point beyond this call, what does Tech4Good mean for you? We'd like to get some little personal testimonials and videos. And again, that may be something that you can share on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever, just to draw in people and show that that there's lots of different voices here and lots of different interest in Tech4Good. It's not a one size fits all thing. Sarah and Catherine will be sending out invitations for you to submit your videos imminently. But I can't emphasize enough, if you go back to the idea of who's in the network of partners and sponsors, you can see the breadth of organizations, but really the individuals and your interest in this is what can drive the entries. We know that works every year. It's worth mentioning that if you're a judge, you can still suggest that somebody nominates. There's no way that you can influence it enough through the process that they would then turn out to be the winner. So there's no constraint on any one of us telling somebody that they think they'd make a great entry in the Tech4Good Awards. And we know that works in terms of connecting in with our community of supporters and sponsors. And then what's the running order? Well, entries will close on the 5th of May. And the BT Young Pioneers got an extra few days after that. So there are a couple of things we've dropped in. We've tried this before, but the shift to virtual really does make a difference. We're going to run a couple of webinars, how to win a Tech4Good Award. And that's a good chance for people who are thinking of entering to find out more about how we sort of judge it. Also just introduce them to the entry process a bit more. Most of our entries happen anyway between the 28th of April and the 5th of May on this sort of schedule. Get a big bulge in the last few days. So we'll be using them in our comms process. We'll be using those two webinars as a chance to obviously raise the profile of the awards generally. So if you're either send somebody to enter now or tell them to come to one of the webinars is the obvious call to action right now. It builds up in the next 6 weeks, whatever that is, 7 weeks through the 5th of May. But now's the time to start pointing people in the direction of those two events. And also to point out to them they need to get their entries in by the end of the 5th of May. Again, we'll be sharing communication stuff with you after this so that you get the sense of that messaging. Hopefully it will start to land in your inbox and you can then pass it on to other people rather than remembering all of this now. Once the entries have closed, we'll do the shortlisting, and various people will be involved in that process as always. Some sponsors and partners and judges will have different roles in different parts of the categories, and we'll announce the finalists on the 2nd of June, which is an announcement in a PR sort of press sense, sharing that out. That's also when we tell the finalists that they're finalists. That's the main thing that we do at that point, and invite them to the finalists and judges networking event. Again, previously this was something that we enjoyed at the top of BT Tower, but actually worked really nicely as a Zoom sort of networking event last year anyway. So we're going to be putting time into that, making sure that we can bring the judges and the finalists together for a decent amount of time, and making a virtue of that in terms of both the networking and the judges having a chance to meet some of the finalists and vice versa. The judges will do their judging on the 17th of June. We've actually got a new awards platform, piece of software that we're using, which so for those of you that love the very manual Excel spreadsheets, neither of which are Sarah and Catherine, that's not what's going to happen this year. The judges themselves will be getting access to some of the back end of that and being able to score things and so on. But I think we will stick to the idea of everybody coming together and then confirming all the decisions and seeing scores and pulling it together. That judging session, for anybody who's ever been involved in it, I think is a real highlight in terms of sharing knowledge and insights and understanding of what we mean by Tech4Good. So anybody who's involved in the judging, it should expect it to be the same as it has been before. The awards ceremony last year was the first time we'd ever moved it online. I think we got it about right, and so we're going to do something similar. We had an after party that broadly worked as well, so expect to see something like that. This time last year we didn't even know we were going to have to do that, so we feel a little bit more confident about approaching that. We know who we're going to work with, we know how it's going to work. It's going to be on the 7th of July when we announce the winners. And then the other thing that worked really nicely last year was the winners dinner, which was supported by the Wishful Company. And again, that's a great idea, a great way for the winners to connect up and our sponsors and guests, and we'll do something similar on the 14th of July. So similar running order to last year. You may remember last year that we were doing this in September. That was because we were attempting to hook into another event, which in the end didn't happen because of COVID. So this is back to the more traditional timetable that you remember from previous years of starting on March and running through to the announcements in July. And obviously if you're involved in any of those things, you'll begin to be notified about those dates and times according to whatever your role is in the process. So enough of that stuff. There's Jac. I'm gonna share if I turn off my screen, can I see the whole gallery thing? Is that how it works? Is it stop sharing? Yeah, that's better. Where's Jac? Can't see.
Hi.
Oh yeah, how you doing, Jac?
Hi, good, thanks.
So we're gonna just sort of catch up a bit on where you're at, but can you tell everybody who you are and what Hug is? Just explain more about the sort of basically what you do in terms of Tech for Good.
Yeah, of course. I have got a Hug here, so it's probably useful showing you what Hug is. So Hug was developed from some university research that's probably about 5-6 years in the making. And Hug was designed for people living with late stage dementia. And in response to a lady within a care home whose carer said all she really needs is a hug. She wasn't getting many visitors from family and friends. So we went about as designers, as product designers, thinking about how we could replicate or design a hug, something that could offer some comfort. So we came up with this. This is Hug. It's got weighted arms and legs. So it feels like when you're hugging it, it feels like you're both giving this a hug, but also receiving a hug as well. And in terms of the tech side for Hug, there's a small electronics module within it that mimics a heartbeat, but also plays a playlist, personalized music. And it's been having an amazing effect on the people that we've tried this with. We've recently evaluated it within the NHS and a care home company as well. And because of the results and the interest that we had, we've last year launched a spin-out company to bring the Hug to market. So that's kind of at the point where we actually heard about Tech4Good Awards and decided to put an application in. So it was just at the start of the spin-out company for Hug.
Yeah. And of course, it's you spun out and you're off and running. You're on the One Show. I think that's the next big one I know about.
Absolutely.
You know about the sales or anything else. You're on the One Show.
Yes, a lot's happened in the last year. And I think kind of winning the Tech4Good Awards as well kind of catapulted us probably a bit faster than expected into really kind of pushing this as a product. And certainly we did a crowdfunder as well through the Tech4Good Awards. And that was very successful, and it allowed us to kind of place the first order to get Hug into production. And since then, since winning the award as well, we've partnered with Alzheimer's Society and another couple of charities and companies as well. But also there's been a lot of kind of media interest, kind of culminating in a 5-minute film on BBC on the One Show last month. So yeah, it's been fantastic journey over the last year.
What does that? I'm just wondering, what happens when you're on the One Show? Does the telephone just start ringing and never stop, or did it just like, oh, your mum noticed it?
It went crazy. It really did. Actually producing the film there was a lot of work behind that that another team member took on. So it's quite a stressful process, but actually once it aired, literally within a couple of hours, we had doubled our orders. The interest just went, through the roof. So it certainly kind of pushed us to kind of progress a lot quicker as well. We can't get these things made quick enough. So we're currently waiting on the first order, so the first manufacturing order to come through. So, but yeah, the demand is certainly there, and it's opened up new audiences as well, which has been really great. So yeah, definitely worth doing.
And in terms of your original intention, the value of the hug to particular groups, has that extended as well? I mean, I'm guessing that you had a particular user in mind, but this publicity and promotion is obviously drawing attention to others who say, oh, would it do this? Could it do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, it was developed for people living with later stage dementia, but I think since we've been talking about hug and the immediate attention that it's got, we're getting a lot more inquiries for other areas as well, for things like autism as well, social isolation, obviously at the moment as well. Yeah. We've had a lot of interest around having more hugs for that. So yeah, it's made us start to kind of explore what hug can be and can kind of contribute in terms of other areas as well. So yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so, I mean, have you had to change your plans for the next year, really, in the last few months? I guess that what you're saying is you can't produce them quick enough. You're selling them to people you didn't know you were going to be interested in them. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I guess the team's got to get bigger. And I mean, in terms of the actual enterprise part of what you're doing, then that's presumably right in the middle of what you're doing now, is sort of scaling up your ambitions and thinking about where you go next.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of pushed us to scale up quickly, but it's also given us many more opportunities, I would say. So these kind of new partnerships we're developing, it's allowing us to produce a version of hug which we weren't expecting to do so soon. So in terms of the bespoke nature of being able to add personalized music, that was something we didn't think we'd be able to do straight away. But obviously, because of the demand, the interest, especially the crowdfunder as well, having that funding has allowed that to happen a lot sooner. So yeah.
Great. Does anybody have any questions for Jac? I mean, I think given the numbers involved, if you want to ask a question, just unmute and shout out. I've got a couple more that I was going to ask about, but just to keep, draw you in a bit. So you grew out of a university project, I think, is that right? So
yeah, that's right.
How's that linking back at the moment? What do you think that will look like in the sort of next version that you spun out of something? Not quite clear where you're sitting, whether you're sitting in both bits now.
Yeah, I think so. We are connected to the university in a way, because obviously it was developed there, but we've certainly been given the kind of autonomy to just as a business to develop hug and evolve it in a way that that we're hoping to, there's going to be future versions of this as well. So there's obviously still the interest from the university, and they've been a great support in allowing us to bring this product out of university research. So yeah, it's been great to see that happen as well, to be given that opportunity. So
yeah, cool. And I mean, anything in particular, looking at where we are now in the cycle, anything you can think about how we reach people who are potential winners for this year's awards, that you look back on where you were at a year ago? I think the key theme for me in all of these launch events is to make sure we reach as many people as possible. Is there anything you can think of that
I think in terms of our experience and how we became aware of Tech4Good Awards, certainly we were following the awards for a few years and seeing some of the winners come out of it. And I think we felt, especially last year, the way things had changed for us as a company. We had quite a few barriers to overcome because of the pandemic and kind of losing funding and things. So we just felt like it was a great opportunity just to go for it. and to to see where this goes. I think in terms of the reach, I think anyone thinking of applying for these awards, I would just say just go for it, because the opportunities are there. The networking around it as well has been fantastic. Yeah.
Great, thank
really
you.
Good.
Jason, you've got a question.
Yeah, hi Jac.
Hello. Hi.
I think Mark missed one of your awards off actually, because didn't you get the winner of winners as well?
Yes, yeah, People's Choice and winner of winners. Yeah.
But one thing I always like to ask people who've crowdfunded with us is, did you get any unexpected contacts or anything that came out of crowdfunding that you know was a real surprise?
I think it was just the scale from the crowdfunding. The people that we reached was absolutely fantastic, and then all the comments that we got through the donations as well, which we really weren't expecting, and it also helped us kind of show that we had moved on from a university project and this is happening, and the support that we got was amazing, and it led to many more conversations afterwards as well. Which has really helped us kind of really push, hug and scale quickly. So that was certainly something we weren't really expecting through the crowdfunding, which has been really good, really great.
Yeah, great. I noticed you're still getting donations coming through as well a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, we kept the crowdfunding open because we find, especially I think with the subject, with it being around dementia, is that so many people can connect to it, and whenever we seem to have like a media splash like the One Show, by having the crowdfunder open, it allows people to still contribute and donate, and it's been a really good platform for allowing that to kind of continue. So yeah, it's been fantastic.
Great, really good to hear.
Great. So next up we have Esther, sorry, I'm just sharing my screen, from Children on the Edge, and I'm just pulling that up to remind myself they're the Education Award winner. I'm not going to share that actually because it's much more interesting for me to be able to see everybody anyway. Just making sure everybody's back in. All the rooms have closed now, haven't they?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So Esther, how are you doing?
All right.
How's things in the world of Children on the Edge? Can you tell us, as Jac did, tell us exactly what Children on the Edge does and why you won a Tech4Good Award?
So we work with some of the most marginalised children around the world, about 15,000 at the moment, and one of our flagship projects is working in the Kutupalong refugee camp, which you have heard a lot about at the moment on the news, unfortunately, with the recent fire. But we've been working there for about 10 years and providing education. And one of the main stumbling blocks that we came across was that children are not allowed to learn in Bengali, and then they can't also understand that they have a Rohingya dialect, which none of the learning materials that are being provided were actually in. So although we were allowed to provide education, it wasn't really meaningful. They weren't able to understand the majority of what was being provided. So we started to provide video lessons instead, where we would get the material and make sure that it was subtitled or dubbed, because there's no actual written language for the Rohingya dialects. So dubbed lessons sent out to 150 classrooms, which kind of revolutionised their understanding. And at the same time, they wanted to use the video technology, and they started, they had been historically creating their own newsletters to have a voice outside of the camps and some connection. So they started to record their own video newsletters, which became an online platform called Moja Kids, which brings a lot of joy for the kids.
Well, and the people who receive it. I mean, who watches that content? Is it that extended families and people outside?
Yeah, it is around in the camps, but primarily it then gets sent out into the community schools in Bangladesh, in Cox's Bazar and in the enclaves, and so they are sharing their news back and forth, and they're genuinely connecting with children that have experiences outside of the camp. back and forth, which I think really helps with social cohesion and breaking down those tensions and prejudices as well.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously like a ridiculously difficult time in their lives anyway. All of that stuff is really important, and it heightens the value of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And tell us a bit about the tech, in the sense of the sorts of technologies you're talking about.
Very, very simple. So essentially, we've got a very small digital team that create and dub the videos in a little green screen studio, very makeshift, and they WhatsApp that to smartphones that each of the teachers have, which connect into small projectors in each classroom.
Neat. So lo-fi relatively. I mean,
yes, absolutely.
WhatsApp as the distribution platform.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's all written up on the charity digital tech recipes that they're doing at the moment, which is useful.
Nice. And so just a little bit in terms of Tech4Good Awards. This time last year, what prompted you to enter?
Well, I think I was looking around for ways to connect and almost promote what we were doing. We were a small organisation, and we wanted to kind of look at other people that were doing similar things. I think I Googled actual kind of charity Tech4Good almost without even knowing that it existed, and up popped this, and I decided to apply, and was just so pleasantly surprised at the how substantial the experience is compared to other kind of awards where it's just a bit of a token thing, a logo on your website, or you actually are meeting this huge community of people that are doing incredible things. So yeah, it was a real revelation for us.
Cool. And next steps, what's going to happen this year in terms of your work?
Well, for the camps, at the moment we're still waiting for the classrooms to be able to open again. There's been another spike in COVID cases, but we are still using that video technology primarily to sort of disseminate health information. A lot of suspicion around Western medicines and the vaccines, so we're dubbing doctors talking about all the basics to do with COVID and vaccinations and getting that out on the Moja Kids website. But our digital team have been beavering away throughout the whole of lockdown and have got a whole year's worth of digital lessons ready to go. So we're just chafing at the bit for those classrooms to open up. But thanks to Tech4Good, we had a crowdfunder and raised some money to sort of fund the equipment in Uganda, so that those Moja Kids newsletters can start going back and forth with children in Uganda, which is really exciting. That was a big perk for us. And we've also been working with Lenovo, who sponsored the prize, on different ideas around using tablets in Chakatu refugee camp, where we provide early learning opportunities, which has obviously been very curtailed by COVID, but how you can use tablets in the community even when you can't have a building with a projector. So yeah, it's really spun out like that in terms of sort of creative thinking during COVID.
Yeah. Well, it's obviously great as well to hear that a tech giant like Lenovo is connecting up in such an interesting way with a project like yours, and that obviously from our point of view, that's the point of what we're trying to do, is that networking and connection and finding the common ground. So that's really cool.
We found a lot of synergy with what they were trying to do, and that's been great. And they also helped us where there's been the explosion in Beirut, providing laptops for the children that lost their laptops and couldn't connect to their schoolwork anymore. So it's been really good.
Right. So in a sense becomes a model for other situations as well, I guess, in that way. That's
absolutely.
Yeah. Fantastic. Anybody got any questions for Esther? Please feel free to put your hand up or just speak out. In terms of this year then, any suggestions about how we reach more people? That's the number one question for me today. How could we make sure, apart from making sure it's found on Google in your case, any networks that you're part of where you think, oh, you know what, there must be a load of people out there who could win it? Email lists or Facebook pages or WhatsApp groups that you're members of?
I think a lot of the networking that we got through you would also benefit from it. So Hub Simru Africa in Wales, they approached us about using technology. They're really looking to be able to use more of these methods as throughout lockdown. I think all of the usual things, but I actually think Google advertising, a simple couple of Google ads, if people are in that area that they're doing some sort of charitable stuff with tech, then it's going to come up.
Cool. Thank you. Well, congratulations again, and thanks so much for all the amazing work you're doing as well. I mean, that's wonderful stuff. Hi, Matthew. How you doing?
I'm very good, thank you, Mark.
Yeah. Can you tell us about your Tech4Good Award entry and winning for the Artist Support Pledge?
Yeah, so I set up Artist Support Pledge in March last year, 16th of March, as a means of supporting artists and makers through COVID-19, through the pandemic. It basically connects an artist to buyers through digital media, and in most cases through Instagram. It's now a global movement and an important microeconomy. It's actually a really simple concept. Artists post images of their work on their Instagram accounts using the hashtag Artist Support Pledge. Each work is for sale for no more than £200, but it can be less. And every time an artist reaches £1,000 worth of sales, they pledge to buy another artist's work for £200. So it's a very simple formula, and buyers can find art for sale by following hashtag Artist Support Pledge.
Cool. And I'm imagining the numbers are significantly bigger than you might have expected. It's going to be one of those stories, isn't it?
Yeah, well, to be honest, when I set it up, I thought it might cover a few of my friends and colleagues in the southeast of the UK and in London, but very rapidly the numbers went up. And at the beginning, I mean, for the first month or two, I was getting more than 2 messages a second, and that was virtually 24 hours of the day from people all over the world wanting to join and participate. You know, obviously that's slowed down now, but it's still growing, it's still increasing, people are still using it. The nature of what it's become has surprised me in many ways. You know, I didn't really know what it was going to become because I didn't really know what I'd made. But it's the sense that it's a movement, and it's not just, you know, at first it sort of felt like it was Instagram. Whereas I think, you know, everyone sort of realized now that it's not purely about Instagram. And I'm now looking at real world activities. So in the autumn, we'll have our first museum show. And we'll still be using social media, etc., as it's sort of the glue, if you like, that pulls it all together. It's the way that we can be both local and global. So you can have a real world exhibition of a group of artists in a particular part of the world, but they are then connected through the technology to artists all over the world. So it shifts our understanding of global and local in a way which, you know, we haven't done in the art world before.
Cool. And it's still just you answering those texts every second, every half a second. I mean, is the team now, hopefully?
Yeah, no, that's about to change. It has largely been me, but I have kind of found ways of doing it effectively. But I'm about to get admin support, and I'm just about to, well, I'm now partnering up with Artist Newsletter, the information company, who will be supporting me, and they're providing funding as well. And I'm also about to commission funding, someone to do the funding for me, basically, and also research, because of the nature of what's been created as a kind of circular economy within the arts. It hasn't happened before, so it's an interesting model, not only because we need to understand how it works and how that might operate through other art forms, whether that's music, literature, whatever else, and how that might work using social media and digital media. But also, you know, in terms of going forward, in terms of how we manage this as a business and also apply for funding, we need to know what it is. We need to understand the beast and how it works. So that's sort of the next step.
Cool. And what about non-fungible?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I've played around a little bit with that, but I'm not. I think it starts to get too complicated at the moment. And one of the things that really works with our support pledge, and has been my mantra from the beginning, really, is light touch and effective. It's got to be easy to do, and it's got to work. So, you know, one of the reasons I used Instagram is that a lot of artists use it, and it's fairly simple. So it's structurally already in place. So it's basically taking the tools that were already there to create a market for goods that already existed but didn't have a market. You know, that the range of artwork on Artist Support Pledge tends not to be found in art galleries because it's too small and the profit margins for galleries aren't high enough. So it's created an economy and a market for artists' work that didn't exist before by using a technology that already, you know, that exists and is widely used.
Cool. Thank you. Well, congratulations.